Let's return to our leading story. That is the U.S. making way for Turkey to launch a major military operation in northern Syria. And we'll speak to Ibrahim Kalin. He's the spokesman and chief advisor for President Erdogan. He's joining us from Belgrade. Thanks very much for speaking to us on Al Jazeera. So if we start with the latest development out of the U.S., Mr. Kalin, and the Pentagon is saying that the U.S. does not endorse the Turkish operation, a State Department official describing it as a very bad idea. So clearly, there's a lot of pushback. What is the actual aim of this military campaign that Turkey is planning in northeast Syria?
The actual goal is to establish a safe zone, which will serve two purposes. One is to secure Turkey's border with Syria by eliminating the terrorist elements, whether Daesh, ISIS, or PKK, PYD, YPG, and other elements. And second one is to create a space for the refugees to return to voluntarily and safely. The safe zone idea, our president has raised this issue for the last 3-4 years. He discussed it with President Obama, a number of European leaders in the past. And in fact, President Trump has also endorsed this idea. And if you remember, about 8 months ago, he said he was pulling out of Syria. But his military and security establishment has refused to follow his orders. Now, after a phone call with our president last night, he has again taken this decision and made it public. And we believe it's in the interest of Syria's territorial integrity and the Syrian people, as well as Turkey's national interest, to establish this safe zone, because that area has become, over the last 2-3 years, a safe haven for PKK terrorists. Let's remember what Americans call, or what some of these forces call themselves as PYD, YPG in Syria, in fact, is PKK in Syria. And PKK is a terrorist organization listed as such in Europe, in the United States, and elsewhere. It's really an irony of history for the United States to pick up a Marxist-Leninist terrorist organization as an ally. When I hear some American politicians or some state officials from the Pentagon or other places saying that
Mr. Kalin, you raised some important points about ISIL as well as refugees.
Allies. I always thought that when they say ally, they refer to Turkey.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. We'll talk about ISIL and refugees, some points that you raised. But first, speaking of Donald Trump, so he's just tweeted in the past hour or so that he's ready to obliterate the Turkish economy if your country does anything off limits, in quotes, in Syria. What's your reaction to that? And what do you understand off limits to be?
Well, I just saw the tweet. We act wisely. Our president has a lot of wisdom, and wisdom requires constructive rather than destructive approach. We've been very responsible. Turkey has done more than any other country for the Syrian people over the last 7 years. And for the Syrian refugees, we have about 3.5 million Syrian refugees living in Turkey for the last 4 or 5 years. And our efforts in Geneva, in Astana, through the political process, have always been to help the Syrian people. And we've done more than any other country. When it comes to fighting ISIS or Daesh, Turkey has also done more than any other country when we eliminated more than 3,000 Daesh terrorists in the Jarablus area. But we have not occupied any part of Syria when we did that. We have no interest in occupying any part of Syria in the east of Euphrates or the west. When we entered Jarablus to fight against Daesh, we have not stayed there. We have returned those places to local residents. When we entered Afrin, again, we did the same. And after we secured the perimeters there, we returned the places back to the local residents. So the same thing will happen in the east of Euphrates.
How are you going to ensure that this military campaign doesn't cause a humanitarian disaster? And what will happen to those people that you say you're going to return? Because the United Nations, from its part, is saying that it's preparing for the worst.
Well, to the contrary, when these people go back to their homes, it will be for their safety. It will take off the migration pressure off of us, as well as Europe. Look, we have no interest in changing the demographics in Syria. It was PYD, YPG that actually changed the demographics in the east of Euphrates by entering and invading these Arab towns and villages, Turkoman towns or Christian towns and villages, forcing people to leave or settling them forcefully in other places. In fact, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch published 2 separate reports about this. And one of the reports claimed that actually some of the things that PYD-YPG did in some of these Arab towns amount to war crimes. No one has reported about this because it goes against this narrative that PYD-YPG fighters are fighting against these Daesh barbarians. But in fact, it is a Marxist terrorist Leninist organization that has oppressed and killed and forced Kurdish people to go to other places as well.
Okay,
to the contrary, we're not forcing anybody to go back in Syria to places where they don't want to go.
Okay, here's the thing. When it comes to ISIL, though, France, for example, is saying that the U.S. pullout and the Turkish offensive could, in fact, strengthen the Islamic State. Same warning we heard from Brett McGurk, who is a former U.S. Special Envoy for the fight against ISIL. So are you not worried about a resurgence of ISIL? Are you saying that these statements are simply incorrect?
We are determined to fight against Daesh unabated. We have fought against them along the Turkish-Syrian border, on the Turkish soil, on the Iraqi side, when we helped them, in fact, in Mosul and other places. We will never tolerate Daesh to come back in any form of shape, whether in Syria or in Iraq or somewhere else. But let's remember, this is not only one country's responsibility. It is the international community's responsibility. And in fact, it's the failure of the international community that they have not been able to help the Syrian refugees, bring a political solution to the conflict, and destroy ISIS once and for all.
And just for the sake of time, allow me to jump in there.
What we can do, in fact, with our full capacity to make sure that ISIS doesn't come back in any form or shape, but we will coordinate it with the U.S., with Europeans, with Arab countries, with Iran, with Russia,
and just for the sake of time, allow me to ask you this.
All of us consider Daesh to be an enemy and threat.
Right, and just let me ask you this. The SDF, I'm sure you're aware, is vowing to respond. What is your reaction to that?
Well, Turkey is determined to clear those areas from any terrorist elements. We will return those places back to the local people. The Syrian refugees have refused to go back to places under PYD-YPG control because they never felt secure in those places. But in Jarablus, Elbab, Aziz, and other places where we have returned the cities back to the local residents, more than 350,000 Syrian refugees have gone back to their homes. Secondly, PYD-YPG has harassed, killed, or kidnapped not only Arabs, Kurds, and others who do not subscribe to their ideology, but also Christian children. The Syria community has made a number of statements about this. The PYD-YPG kidnapping their Christian children to enlist them in their ranks. Okay. So what they have done there, in fact, is a threat to Syria's territorial integrity, political unity, and the safety and prosperity of the Syrian people. Our goal is to secure our border just as any country cares about their border security. We have to take care of our own border security and make sure that the Syrian refugees go back to their homes where they've come from safely and voluntarily.
We thank you very much for joining us on Al Jazeera. Thank you.